I'm a pizza delivery guy for a small independent joint in Kentucky. Now, I won't brag, but we have a reputation for being the best there is in our town, and I can't take much of the credit. I'm not one of the chefs. One of the reasons we're so popular, though, other than our buy one get one free Fridays, is that we deliver a bit further out than our competitors. You see, we had the genius idea to invest a bit of extra moolah into a couple of delivery cars with heated seats. This has the bonus of keeping the pizza warm for longer, so we can deliver further out than our rivals. One of our regular stops is a local halfway house just outside in the boonies on the outskirts of town. We're the only pizza joint that delivers that far, and our competitors claim it's too far, but I don't believe them. I think they just don't want to deal with ex-cons and former, or supposedly former, addicts. But, I'll tell you what. Most of these guys who are just out of jail or down on their luck, they're some of the best tippers you'll ever meet. Most folks like this aren't bad deep down, at least not when they're faced with a delicious piping hot pizza pie as a reward for a hard week's work, anyway. So yeah, I always enjoyed getting sent on a delivery to the halfway house. I met some real interesting people too. Sometimes they'll order real late, especially if pizza was on the supervisor, and he'd invite me to join them for a slice if my shift was over. That's the beauty of working for a little independent joint. My boss doesn't care if I chill with the customers, and I bet Papa John's doesn't let you do that. Now anyways, this one night, I got an order for a single 12-inch pepperoni. Uncommon. Normally they'd order enough to feed half a dozen or so guys, but not unheard of. When I pulled up outside the halfway house, most of the lights were off. It didn't look like anyone was in. Except there's this guy pacing back and forth in front of the steps. He's studying his cell phone, looking very nervous and bothered. And I could see his very pale complexion in the headlights of my delivery car. Well, no worries, I thought. He's probably just jonesing for some pizza. And so I fished the bag out of the heated passenger seat and headed over to him. I opened with a nice greeting, but my words just die right there on my lips. I can just tell this guy isn't right. He's acting like a heroin junkie desperate for his next fix, scratching his neck, his eyes, darting this way and that, and I checked the name on the receipt. Hey, you Freddy? I asked him. And he looks at me, nods, and then his phone seems to buzz. His eyes are darting back down to it like the phone itself is what's giving him his fix, but if this was a fix, it was a bad trip. And by now, I've taken the pizza out of the bag, ready to hand it to him and head off. He's already paid through the app, and something told me this guy wasn't giving me an extra tip or inviting me inside to shoot the breeze with the other guys. I'm real sorry, Freddy says. And for a moment, I don't understand what he's saying. And then this fella just sort of fully uppercuts the pizza box that I'm holding. Just punches it upwards and towards me, so the damn pizza, thankfully still boxed up, smacks me in the face. I'm momentarily disoriented, and then Freddy continues to charge me. For this small, wiry guy, let me tell you that he was strong. I take a blow to the head, thankfully softened by the pizza box in my face and a swift jab to the ribs. Then, with the strength of someone who absolutely has to be driven by more than just regular energy, he shoves me to one side, runs straight for my car, and leaps in. Now, the fool that I am, I'd left the keys in the ignition to keep the headlights on. So Freddy does this absolutely epic U-turn, which would have been more impressive if it hadn't nearly hit me. Meanwhile, I'm tossing the pizza box aside and trying to get to my feet. Where's my damn cell phone, I thought. It turns out it had fallen into the bushes somewhere, and I could search for it later, but for now, I just had to watch as Freddy peels off in my wonderful new Toyota Prius that belonged to my employer. And let me tell you, this guy clearly could not drive. At the time, I had no idea if this was because he was on something or he simply couldn't actually drive, but I later found out that, yeah, he had no idea how to operate a car. So I just watched as my beloved Prius disappeared around the bend out of sight. Well, never seeing that again, I thought, moments before I heard a terrible crash, and then the sound of multiple car alarms sounding at once. Freddy had made it about 2 blocks before reaching a more built-up area, spinning out of control and crashing into 3 parked cars. I didn't see this actually go down, but the owner of one of the totaled cars immediately calls the cops. I was torn between sprinting down the hill and checking out the site of the accident, or knocking on the halfway house to ask for help finding my phone and getting a general idea of what the hell was going on. And I opted for the latter. And so here's what happened. Freddy had done a short stint in jail for possession. He was a reformed meth addict, with reformed very much in air quotes, and he's been at the halfway house for just a few days. Apparently his girlfriend had been cheating on him while he was in jail, which really meant she'd broken up with his ass long ago, and for some reason when he got out of jail he expected her to be waiting with open arms. And instead, she was engaged. So Freddy, in his infinite wisdom, decided that the best solution was to go and kill the fiancé. Then his girl would want to be with Freddy again or something, I guess. I don't know, I'm not on meth. But Freddy couldn't drive. So he found our pizza flyer pinned to the halfway house notice board, read the note that we delivered there, and decided his grand plan would be to order a pizza, hijack my car, and then go and kill his ex-girlfriend's fiancé. Maybe his ex-girlfriend too. I found out later that they now lived 3 states away. He was convinced that he'd managed to drive across multiple state lines in a stolen vehicle, having never operated one before in his life, and this master plan would go off without a hitch. He didn't even have a weapon. But the next day, he also didn't have any legs. I don't mean to make light of the situation, but it's freaking ridiculous, isn't it? This guy screwed up his heist so badly that when he crashed into 3 parked cars, the collision was so bad that it resulted in both of his legs having to be amputated, one just above the knee and one just below. Sucks for him, and I really mean that. I feel bad for this dude. And the rest of us, I guess we got off lightly. Damaged vehicles can be fixed. Amputated legs, as of now, not so much. Freddy went back to prison, of course, for a parole violation and then a whole host of different offenses. And I still work for that same pizza joint. But now, I'm manager of a new branch that we actually recently opened, and I still make sure our guys deliver to that halfway house. One bad slice doesn't need to spoil the pie, as they say, and on the occasions where I feel like doing a delivery myself, you can best believe those guys invite me in for a chat and ask me to tell them the story of the time a pepperoni pizza nearly cost me my life. I'm from Cornwall, in the very southwest of England, so I'm very sorry for any strange punctuation and such, and I hope I don't come across like a thunder-twont cuckwit. Now any road, I was a pizza delivery guy in the UK for a few years, ending in 2020 after I got COVID and had to self-isolate, by which time people just weren't ordering pizza in our little village anymore. We have a bunch of things in the UK. Proper cheese, Marmite, old remnants of World War II where you least expect them, Cornish pasties. You know what we don't have, though? Kaiju. At least, I thought we didn't, up until that night in the winter of 2017. I was sent out by the big pizza chain that I worked for to deliver a pizza to an address I'd never heard of. It fell just inside of our delivery area, and I was one of the moped drivers, and it was a bit of a struggle to follow the GPS directions while riding a scooter, so I kept having to pull over. I knew for sure that by the time I reached the customer, the pizza and sides were probably going to be cold, which meant a complaint and probably a discount that would come out of my wages. To make matters worse, the route seemed to be leading me down the back roads through the forest. Now, nothing wrong with that, in the daylight, but I've always been a bit of a scaredy cat, not gonna lie, so I just hunkered down and headed for roughly where I thought the location was. And then, I heard the kaiju sound. You know the sound. You probably heard something like it 1,000 times, even if you haven't seen a single Godzilla movie. It's like that bwong from Inception mixed with Godzilla's roar. Hollywood uses it in trailers all the time, but less so back in 2017. But every time it's an indicator that something big, bad, and terrifying is coming. Boing! I heard it through my crash helmet. Boing! And I kept driving, not wanting to look up. Now I knew deep down that a freaking Godzilla wasn't going to be towering over the trees. I knew a T-Rex wasn't going to come charging after me, and I knew King Kong wasn't about to beat his chest and howl at me, and I knew Leonardo DiCaprio wasn't about to tell me I was in a dream. But the sound was happening, I wasn't imagining it. Things just got weirder when I saw a cardboard sign up ahead attached to a tree. It literally said, "Pizza Guy this way." Yeah, that wasn't sketchy at all. Godzilla roars and a mysterious sign. I should have just booked it out of there, except now I realized where I was. Out in the woods was an old World War II bunker. We used to hang out there as kids sometimes, and there was an old broken air raid siren attached to the outside. Wincing against the sound, I realized that someone had got it functioning, at least enough to play their own recorded sounds through it. Now you might think I was a total muttonhead for grabbing the pizza and heading to the door of the shelter, but I kinda knew who was staying there. It was a group of squatters, hippie types who wanted to live off the grid and had decided to make that air raid shelter their home until presumably the council came along and kicked them out. I knew because a buddy of mine had been hanging out with them a bit, and it made sense that he might have been the one to order pizza or at least orchestrate it. I knocked on the door to the bunker. No answer. Well, I wasn't having that. The order was a cash on delivery. If the pizza didn't get paid for, I didn't get paid. And so balancing the boxes of pizza, garlic bread, and chicken wings on one hand, I gave the door to the shelter a shove and it just swings open. The sporadic siren sound was still going off. I kept my crash helmet on, if only so I didn't have to hear that annoying kaiju roar. They'd done up the main room of the shelter pretty nicely, and I remember coming here as a teen to drink and smoke and clumsily try and hook up with girls. The place used to be covered in shite graffiti and stank of piss, and now it looked like the hippies had painted it, spruced the place up. There were even a few potted plants sitting around. It would have been nice if not for the utterly eerie feeling caused by it being deserted. I was getting pretty fed up with carrying the food around and also that roaring kaiju sound, so I looked around, and there was a desk and what looked like some kind of audio equipment. Although to me it looked defunct, switched off maybe, but at least I had somewhere to put the food down, and inside the shelter the noise was nowhere near as bad. But then, even through my helmet, I heard the distinct crack of a footstep behind me stepping on something. Then, I felt the distinct crack of something hitting me square across the shoulder blades, hard. I let out a loud yell and whirled around. The guy who stood in front of me was topless, his hair long, lank, and greasy, and he had a wild and unkempt beard. His torso was smeared with something. Let's just say that it didn't smell good. He was holding a pole cue, and that's what he'd hit me with. I can't tell you exactly what he yelled at me, but it sounded something like, "Terrible lizard man, suckin' him, Willie." And then he smacked me with the pole cue again. This time he hit me in the head and the pole cue snapped in half. Now remember, I was wearing my moped crash helmet, so I barely felt the blow. But then this deranged lunatic started lunging at me with the snapped pole cue. I did the only thing I could think of. I jumped forward and head-butted him full force in the face. And in that moment, his nose pretty much exploded, sending blood all over my visor. And I could barely see. So I let out my own feral roar. Godzilla himself would have been proud. Then, I delivered the hardest kick I could muster right into the deranged hippie's taint. He hooted and hollered, and that was all the time I needed to shove him away, dash outside, flip up my blood-covered visor, and very slowly speed away on my pizza chain-branded moped. When I was what felt like a safe distance away, I called the cops. Of course, this was the British countryside, so it took them hours to show up at the old shelter, and by then I'd already gone back to the restaurant and explained what happened. I don't think my manager believed a word of it until the cops eventually called. They hadn't found anyone in that old shelter. They did find some blood and the broken pool cue and the jerry-rigged siren and the laptop. The hippies themselves weren't there, though. In fact, they were all accounted for at an outdoor rave in a farmer's field, all above board. They claimed they had no idea who my assailant could have been, and he was never caught. But the worst part, the pizza and sides had also been taken by the time the cops arrived. Thankfully, I did eventually get answers a few months later. The same guy tried to rob the local village post office. He was a violent crack addict or something who had been in and out of prison for years. When I was called to identify him in a lineup for one of his many crimes, an officer let slip that I'd gotten off really lucky. Here's the weird part. This guy swore blind that he did not set up that laptop to play kaiju roar inception boing sound. He copped to everything else, attacking me, the armed robbery, a few other things too, but that, he insisted it wasn't him, and so did those other hippies. None of them had any reason to lie though, and nobody would have gotten in trouble for that. So who or what the hell was causing that strange, terrifying monster roar? I'm not sure I'll ever know, and frankly, I think I'm just okay that I survived. I work for a pizza restaurant that prides itself on getting things right, and we're hella anal about it. We literally have one of those signs, like in the intro to The Simpsons, that says XXX days since the last incorrect order. Whoever's on shift at the counter has to be reset to 0, we all have to do a forfeit. It's all in good fun, but it just goes to show you how much care we take over getting things right. The funny thing is, we've never had a customer complain on the rare occasion we have made a mistake either. It's not like anything drove us to set up this little game, it just seemed like a cool idea. All of our regular clients were chill. And that is, until Colleen. Actually, in all fairness, Colleen had been chill in the past, but then we'd never gotten her order wrong before. Obviously, I was one of the unlucky ones due to a forfeit that day. I was the delivery driver, which meant that I should have quality checked the order before heading out. So, yeah, it does suck. But part of our perfect pizza promise is that if we get your order wrong, even one bit of it, you don't have to pay for any of it. It was around 5 in the evening. I arrived at Colleen's house minutes before the estimated delivery time. She'd clearly just gotten back from taking her kids to band practice or ballet or something, and she was hustling her children, a boy who looked about 12 and a girl who looked about 8, out of their station wagon. When she saw me, she huffed and was clearly flustered already, scolding me for being early. And as politely as I could, I told her that our estimated delivery time was just that, an estimate, and 6 minutes early was typically considered good. I could see her eyelid twitching at this, and her face was going red. The term Karen really wasn't a thing at this point, but Colleen was clearly going to be a Karen before Karens were cool. The kids were both just really excited that the pizza delivery girl had shown up. Colleen, meanwhile, was determined that because I was early, there had to be something wrong. First, she inspected the garlic bread. I've never seen anyone study garlic bread with such scrutiny. At one point, she was sniffing it so closely that I thought that it might go up her nose. The garlic bread was fine, and so was the rice, and so was the pasta. And then she opened the 20-inch pizza box, a delicious-looking margarita pizza with extra cheese. The kids looked on with awe and excitement. Colleen, meanwhile, flushed beet red. Her eyes opened wide in that kind of angry, preemptive way that some people manage when you just know that the poop is about to hit the proverbial fan. She looked at the pizza, and then she looked back at me, and then back at that pizza again, and then back at me. She spoke her next words slowly, carefully, deliberately, like I was the stupidest person she'd ever met. There is no pineapple on this pizza. That's correct, ma'am. And for a moment, I was confused. Why would there be pineapple on a double cheese margarita? There's supposed to be pineapple, you little idiot girl, Colleen hissed. I looked down at the receipt. Balls. She was right. She'd ordered pineapple as an additional topping on the margarita. Ma'am, I'm so sorry, I said. But good news. This means your whole order is free. Colleen stared at me like I just told her we'd filled our stuffed crust with her dead grandmother. Angrily, she hissed that she does not care about free. She cared about the missing pineapple. She wanted the missing pineapple. And then her kids, bless them, spoke up. They said they really didn't mind, that they didn't actually like pineapple on pizza all that much. I thought I could see fear in the son's eyes as he spoke, and that's when I knew something was very wrong.
We ordered pineapple!
Colleen shrieked. Then, with a dexterity that only an angry soccer mom can muster, she hurled the entire 20-inch pizza box straight at me. It hit me square in the face, and I just stood there for a second, trying to push down my bubbling anger. I couldn't retaliate. I couldn't even yell back. Never before had I experienced a customer hurling a pizza in my face, and it was still hot. It hurt. The most I could do was quickly reach up and try and wipe the melting cheese off my skin before it burnt me. Colleen's daughter had begun to cry.
"Oh, now look what you've done."
Colleen screamed at me, as if it was my fault and not her lunatic rampaging outburst. I didn't think that it could get worse from there, but I didn't factor in Colleen's insanity, nor did I factor in her seemingly fresh manicure. This smartly dressed, tightly wound woman in her 30s leaped at me like some kind of horror movie werewolf. Her claws were out, and she wanted to hurt me. I screwed my eyes tightly shut to protect my eyeballs, and by God, I'm glad I did, because I felt her sharp nails raking down my face across my cheek. Her kids were screaming. I was screaming. Colleen was screaming. Then, my savior appeared. I couldn't see her at the time, but I later recognized her as another customer, Shauna, who lived a few doors down. A large woman, she barreled into Colleen so hard that Colleen went flying along the sidewalk, crashing into some plastic recycling bins. I wiped at my eyes, desperately trying to clear them of cheese and tomato sauce, and Shauna started to ask me if I was okay while Colleen's kids screamed and cried. Then Colleen was up, charging again, this time directly at Shauna, and through blurry vision I saw that she was holding her keys like some type of weapon. No, I wasn't having Shauna, my savior, getting keyed by this dumb party soccer mom over the lack of pineapple on pizza. I can't explain how I did this. I had zero experience in fighting or combat, and especially not wrestling. But as Colleen charged Shauna, I reached out my arm and braced myself and fully, perfectly clotheslined that bitch. This might have been my imagination, but I swear both of Colleen's kids cheered. With Colleen winded and knocked to the ground, Shauna proceeded to straight up sit on her until the cops arrived. Next, the kid's father, Colleen's ex-husband, Colin, I'm being serious when I say that name, turns up. The cops took Colleen away, Colin took the kids away, and Shauna and I had to go to the station to give our statements. Colin and Shauna both remain loyal customers, so I got to find out a little more about what happened. You see, Colleen had developed an addiction to both Xanax and Adderall, and between that and a messy divorce, I guess she had gone a little cuckoo. Colin had been fighting for custody of the kids, but the courts in our state aren't particularly known for siding with fathers. After Colleen's pizza attack, though, thankfully the kids got to live with Dad and eventually had court-appointed supervised visits with Mom. Colleen didn't go to prison. She went to a psych ward for a bit and then rehab, and I agree with that decision. Meanwhile, Shauna, Colin, and the kids were given VIP cards to our restaurant, which meant that they could eat there twice a month totally for free. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the boss decided we could waive my forfeit for the incorrect order this time. Being almost blinded by pizza and false nails was deemed punishment enough. Many years ago, I worked delivering pizzas for a small family-owned pizzeria. Look, I'm not going to pretend that I was totally oblivious to what else I was delivering along with delicious pies. Occasionally, along with the food, I'd be tasked with handing over a padded envelope that smelled suspiciously like weed. And back then, it was more common than you might think, pizza delivery doubling as a weed-dealing syndicate. And maybe I was naive, but I wasn't too worried about being busted. Wasn't my business, wasn't my product, and I could just plead ignorance about what some of the sides actually were. It turns out I was an idiot. I wasn't the only delivery driver, I was just the low-stakes guy, the one who did the weed runs. But the owner and his dad were into some much heavier stuff. I found this out the hard way, although I guess it was harder for them than it was for me. So here's how my average night shift would go down. I was nearly always paired with this guy named Dan. Dan was an old-ass man, easily in his 60s, probably older, and he was the father of Kurno, the owner. Dan and Kurno were two of the best pizza chefs that the world has ever known, and I stand by that. Once you've tried a deep dish Dan or a stuffed crust Kurno, you'd be converted. I'm convinced they could have dominated the pizza business even without the side trade and drug dealing, but I guess we'll never know. Kurno has his own delivery boys, and I was always paired with Dan. I think when Dan and I were working, that was just the soft stuff. Kurno and his boys handled the crack, the smack, and God knows what else was doing the rounds in those days. Dan, full name Bogdan, moved to America as a teen from Serbia, so who knows what kind of thing he knew how to cook up. I heard crocodile mentioned in the aftermath, but I think that was just a rumor. Now anyway, I loved Dan. He was one of the nicest, sweetest, most gentle old men you've ever met. I vaguely knew that he'd seen some heinous stuff in Serbia, but he never talked about it. He made a killer pizza, and sometimes he'd hook consenting adults up with a bit of weed before it was legal. Big frickin' whoop. I loved him, and I loved working with him. Kurno, not so much, but just because he was aloof and a bit scary. He was a big, stoic, and cold individual, and I was a scrawny-ass little runt of a kid who grew up with a stepdad who was a bit of a dick weasel. The point is, I loved Dan, and I loved working for him. It was a Saturday night. We got the call in, a normal order of a deep dish Dan, our Saturday signature special. Probably some sides too, I forget, so these were the days before GPS and apps and things like that, so if you had to deliver an address you didn't know, you used a map. And so that's exactly what I did. Dan cooked up a mean pizza and I headed out in the van to deliver it. When I reached the location, I figured that there must be a mistake. It was a boarded-up, condemned building that clearly did not have anyone living there, let alone someone ordering pizza. I double-checked the map. Definitely the address I had written down on the order slip. Thankfully, there was a payphone nearby. Remember those? I sure freaking do. And I called up the restaurant to check with Dan in case I'd written the address down incorrectly. Dan didn't pick up, and that was weird. Maybe we'd had a rare walk-in customer. It wasn't impossible. I called a couple of more times over the next 15 minutes, and there was still no answer. I was beginning to get a real uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. By now, the pizza had gotten cold anyways, so I made the 20-minute drive back to the restaurant. I could tell something was wrong as soon as I got there. The front door was open. Dan never left it open. If a customer left without closing it, Dan would be there in seconds to keep the heat in. The second indication was the smell of barbecue coming from the kitchen. Sure, we had meat feast pizzas and other meat dishes, but nothing that smelled like this. Our food didn't smell wrong. In the kitchen, I didn't want to look at the elephant in the room, and so I looked at what had been written on the wall first. It was written in tomato puree, I found out later, but of course at the time I thought it was blood. It was a simple message. Your pizza's done. Then I looked at the man, shoved into the pizza oven, only his lower torso and legs visible. I could see that the dials were turned all the way up, and I could smell that the dials were turned all the way up too. I think that's what makes me feel the most sick to this day. The fact that Dan's roasting face smelled almost appetizing. Somewhere in my primal brain, I just smelled cooking meat, and I felt a pang of hunger before realizing this was freaking Dan, my beloved co-worker, the owner's dad. I just hoped he hadn't suffered. A large butcher's cleaver was embedded between his shoulder blades. I really hoped that he'd been murdered before they cooked his face off. And later I found out that he was very much alive as they held him in that burning hot oven, and I don't like to think about it. And as I stared, horrified, frozen, about to piss my pants, I heard a scream from behind me, a guttural, tortured howl of grief. Curnow shoved past me like he didn't even see me there. This man, this unflinching man who I'd always thought was made of cold steel, was weeping and howling like a baby, calling for his daddy, begging him to be okay. Before I could stop him, he pulled Dan from the oven. Most of Dan's face stayed behind. Curnow fell to the floor with the body rocking back and forth, sobbing over his beloved father. And then he looked at me. His face hardened, and if Curnow scared me before, he terrified me now. "You will not call the cops," he commanded me. "Tomorrow you will find a new job. You will be taken care of. And so will they." I didn't know exactly what he meant by they, but I knew enough to understand. I never went back to the pizza restaurant. I don't know how Curnow covered up the murder of his father. I don't want to know. I handled one final brown padded envelope, and this one didn't contain drugs. It contained enough money for me to comfortably move out of state and spend a few months looking for a new job, which is exactly what I did. Call me a coward, but I did not look into the aftermath of what happened in my hometown. I know some kind of gang violence erupted. I know Curnow wasn't openly implicated in any of it, and for my own safety, I want to remain ignorant. Besides, this was decades ago. I have my own family now, and I set up my own restaurant. It's not quite the miraculous pizza joint that Dan deserves as a tribute, but it's the closest I can get. I hope that he's looking down at me from heaven with at least a bit of pride. Whatever his son was into, Dan didn't deserve this. As much as I don't want to know the details, I hope that Curnow was able to dispense some good old-fashioned justice. I'm a delivery guy, but not a pizza delivery guy. I'm a long-haul trucker delivering all manner of things, usually washing machines or games consoles or fridges. Things you'd think are safe to transport, but you'd be surprised what people will heist. Now, true story, a truck carrying the entire U.S. shipment of the Killing Joke action figures got robbed at gunpoint recently. Google it if you don't believe me. Anyway, when this went down, I was on a cross-country haul to Albany from Dallas. I'm legally not allowed to say what exactly I was carrying, but let's just say it was very expensive, very desirable equipment of the medical variety. The kind of cargo that'd make me a bit more jumpy than microwave ovens or custom kitchen deliveries. If you get that reference, congrats, you're an old man like I am. The journey was said to be just over 24 hours, which meant that there was a rest stop and a few hours sleep on my itinerary. I timed things so I'd get to stop at one of my favorite rest stops in Kentucky at around midnight. They had a killer 24-hour diner there, and some other truckers I'd become familiar with over time often stopped there too, so we'd meet up and shoot the breeze. Imagine my disappointment when I pulled into the truck stop, only to discover that the diner was closed for refurbishments, and the only other vehicle in the lot was a beat-up old Range Rover that looked like it had been abandoned there months ago. Nobody was answering the CB radio either, just a completely dead night. Ah, well, I thought, it happens. I always planned for such eventualities, and I'd packed a bunch of healthy, well-rounded meal options such as Slim Jims, Twinkies, Cheetos, and Mountain Dew. You know, all that good stuff that helps keep my trucker bod slim and svelte. I chowed down on some dried meats, mainlined a Twinkie or four, and listened to a couple of CDs, and then decided to catch a few hours sleep before continuing on. Normally on the road, I sleep like a baby. I just slip into the passenger seat, recline it a little, and I'm out like a shot. That night, though, no dice. Something felt off. Maybe it was the diner with all the lights off. Maybe it was the empty truck stop lot. Maybe it was the flickering street lamp near the turnoff. Now, I'm not a superstitious man. I can't explain it. I just had a bad feeling. Real bad. Like something about the whole place was wrong. Now, let me stress this here. I'd been to this truck stop at least a dozen times in the past. It was a favorite, but it was usually a hub of activity, even in the middle of the night. Being here alone felt like I'd crossed some kind of portal, like I was in another world. I really am not the kind of guy who falls into this type of thinking though, I promise. I love horror movies precisely because they don't scare me. Yeah, I get a little paranoid about my cargo getting robbed very occasionally, and I guess that played into it here. But this was something else, man. It sounds like a cliche, but it was like an ill wind was blowing. And I mean that figuratively and literally. It had been a calm night, but as soon as I parked, the wind kicked up. Dust and leaves and debris billowing up around the parking lot. Then there was the abandoned Range Rover. I could swear the windows had been busted out. Was it burned up? I couldn't tell. And then a voice in the back of my head was telling me to go check it out. I had my trusty sidekick, Kirsty. Kirsty's my shotgun. Don't go anywhere without her. If I'm not supposed to have her, then I have a hiding place and, well, I'm not going to implicate myself, but she stays with me at all times in the truck. The idea of walking over to this abandoned car, though, just gave me the full-on, unfiltered heebie-jeebies. And the more I thought about it, the more it started bothering me. My mind started drifting towards various possibilities, and then it started drifting in general until suddenly I was falling asleep. I was nodding off into dreamland. At that moment, I heard a knock, knock, knock. And holy freaking Christmas, I jolted awake. Was I dreaming? Knock, knock, knock again. A little quieter this time, but someone was tapping on the driver's side window. And as I mentioned, I sleep in the passenger seat, and with the truck cab light off, I couldn't really see who was knocking. I could just see the vague shape of a human. I flicked the interior light on, which made it even harder to see who was out there, and I gestured for them to come around to the passenger side, hoping they'd get the hint. And then, it was like they just disappeared, like they ducked down out of view. What the hell? I shut off the interior light. A minute had passed, and then two, and I was starting to think that I'd imagined it, and I'd still been dreaming. Knock, knock, knock again, harder. This time right next to me, the passenger side window. And I jumped up. Okay, this wasn't cool. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and shone it at the visitor. He was dressed in a pizza delivery outfit, a very well-known brand. He had the jacket and he had the cap, brim pulled down low over his face. He didn't seem bothered by the flashlight shining right in his face, but I angled it away regardless and then, against my better judgment, wound down the window.
Can I help you, buddy?
I asked. The pizza delivery guy seemed to grin at me.
I got the pizza you ordered, my friend,
he said. I had not ordered a pizza. I was in the middle of an abandoned truck stop. My phone didn't have reception. The only way I could have ordered pizza was over the CB radio, and, well, obviously I hadn't. I explained this to him, and not once did this guy's grin falter. I could barely see him in the darkness, but his smile was like this bright white catching the light reflecting off of it. The pizza delivery guy reeled off some real name and said that no, definitely the pizza was mine and I'd ordered it. I reiterated that I had not and I didn't want pizza. In truth, I did, absolutely, but I wasn't accepting a strange pizza from a strange grinning guy. Now I shone that flashlight at him again, and that's when I noticed the absolute state of his uniform. If this guy was a Domino's employee, then his uniform had not been replaced since probably the 90s. It was torn, it was filthy. His cap was ripped with bits of hair sticking through places, and the logo was partially unstitched.
Buddy, just move along,
I said.
I don't want your pizza.
He told me he couldn't do that I had paid for the pizza, and he'd be in a lot of trouble if I didn't accept the food I'd paid for. I reached for Kirsty. Usually, Kirsty's appearance causes even the most aggressive weirdo to back down. Not this guy. I still couldn't see his eyes, but his smile grew wider, almost admiring. He held up the pizza box.
You really don't want this pizza?
He said, and my stomach growled. And that's when he tilted his head back and I saw his eyes, or more accurately, his eye. His left eye was bloodshot, wide and staring, and his right eye was just missing. It was covered, not by an eye patch, but gauze. And for a moment he stopped smiling, and somehow that was a relief. And then I cocked Kirsty.
Listen, buddy, I'm going to drive off now. I suggest you step back.
I said. No way was I staying here any longer. I'd find somewhere else down the line to rest.
No!
His sudden yell made me jump, and I cursed myself for being fearful. The smile didn't leave his face, though, but his eye looked almost sad.
It's your pizza. You have to take the pizza. I'm going to put it on the ground and leave, and then you can get it.
And with that, the pizza guy in the filthy uniform walked straight backwards, placed the pizza on the ground, and then continued to walk backwards towards that Range Rover, never once taking his eyes off me. Finally, when he was far enough away, he did turn and got in the car. I heard the engine start and he drove off, and sure enough, in the glare from his vehicle's headlights, I could see that all the windows had been smashed. I know I should have just driven off, but I was curious. Clutching my shotgun, I climbed out the truck and walked over to the pizza. I picked it up, opened the box, and reared back. There was a pizza inside, but it was clearly about a week old. It was moldy, rancid, reeking. Maggots crawled all over the surface, and I recoiled and tossed it across the lot. Then something occurred to me. I went to the back of the truck to check the doors. Had I been robbed or scammed somehow? No, the truck was still locked up tight, but scratched into the paint were 2 words. Don't eat. I hopped into the driver's seat and hightailed it out of there. I didn't stop until I reached Albany. Kirsty did not leave the seat next to me for that entire trip, and I have no explanation as to what happened. Now, I don't believe in anything supernatural, and the man clearly was flesh and blood. I'm pretty sure it was just a couple of tweakers who wanted to put the spooks up some hapless trucker, maybe rob them. And if that was their plan, it worked. While it scared the crap out of me, it has given me an excellent story to tell over the CB radio over the years. However, on the downside, I've never been able to look at pizza the same way again. Just a real quick one here. When I was backpacking in Colombia, I did a bit of work as a delivery guy for a local cafe, delivering food on a busted, barely functioning moped. And I'm not sure how legal it was. I was there on vacation and didn't really pay much attention to visas and the right to work and all that stuff, but given the other crimes that went on, I'm not sure that delivery takeaway for cash under the table really compared. I don't know why I was targeted. I'm not even sure I was targeted. I think I just got extremely lucky. I was working for a little cafe called Popu's, rattling around on the moped to bring food to all sorts of shady characters. In this particular instance, I was delivering maybe 4 sausage pizzas to what I'd been assured was a gentleman's club, and what was almost definitely a gang hideout. I say that almost definitely because I never actually made it to my destination. Sure, there I am, my moped puttering along down a deserted road late at night, when suddenly I see something fly across the road. I don't react quick enough and run straight over the spiked strips that have been tossed across the street. Next thing I know, multiple voices are yelling variants of "get him, kill him, butcher him," etc. in Spanish, and then 4 masked men come bursting out of the trees, charging towards me. 2 of them are swinging machetes, one of them has a freaking scythe, and the other has a baseball bat. Now, surprisingly enough, I don't want to die for no reason in the middle of nowhere, Colombia. So, I run for my absolute life. Genuinely, I ran through the forest and scrubland for a solid 40 minutes, and these guys would not relent. They wanted blood, and to this day I have no idea why. Maybe they thought I was a member of the gang that I was on my way to deliver a pizza to. Maybe they wanted to send a message to Papu's, the cafe. Maybe they just really enjoyed killing tourists, who knows. Eventually I came across a farm. I was dead tired, it was pitch black by now, and I followed the sounds of oinking into the barn. Inside were at least a dozen huge pigs, and I won't lie, I'm a bit scared of pigs. They bite and tug and crash into you, and they're generally pretty intimidating beasts. But it was either the pigs or the machete-wielding maniacs, so I slipped inside one of the pig pens, crouched in the corner, and tried to cover myself with straw. Then, the biggest pig I'd ever seen in my damn life came over to me, and for a moment it looked like it was going to sit on me. I'd escaped being hacked apart just to be crushed by a piglet. But then, the pig lay down in front of me, it grunted and snorted, and a few other pigs joined in, and they created a sort of pig shield, hiding me from view. The machete-wielding gang members burst into the barn. Some of the other pigs started grunting and honking at them and began to bite at their ankles. I was worried they'd start attacking the pigs, but no. These armed men seemed pretty petrified by these hogs. And that's how I spent the rest of the night, cowering behind a gang of pigs, hoping that the machete gang wouldn't return. And thank the Lord Almighty above they didn't. And when morning came, I stumbled out of that barn and came face to face with the farmer. Thankfully, I spoke enough Spanish and he spoke enough English for us to understand each other. He gave me a ride back into town. I didn't even bother handing in my notice to Papu's. I checked out of the hostel I was staying at and got the hell out of the country as soon as I could. I'm never going back to Colombia, never will. And you know what else I've never done? I've never eaten sausages again. So no need for a preamble or anything, just know that when this played out, it was the early 2000s, and I was a 20-year-old woman working a pizza delivery job to help pay my way through college. I was based in a city, so we had so many different customers it was hard to keep track of regulars. One regular order I did remember, though, was this really sweet old couple who lived in a small suburban bungalow. They usually just ordered a pizza and some other stuff on a Friday night, so I was a little surprised when one day we got an order to their address for like 8 huge pizzas. So we get everything cooked and I take the delivery because I love this old couple and we usually chatted for a few minutes, and the tip was a nice bonus too. So I get to the house and even before I knock on the door, something seems wrong. Loud, pumping techno is coming from what seems to be the basement. I knock and the door gets opened. I'm not 100% sure, but I am 99.9% sure that the person who opened the door wasn't either of the old people. In fact, this person was dressed in a black and white wolf fursuit, and I guess he was nonverbal because he gestured to the pizzas, pulled out his pocket to show it was empty, and then did a sort of fake crying gesture before pointing for me to come inside. Now, going inside a customer's house is usually a huge no-no, but I normally would drop in on this couple and I was concerned about them as well as being morbidly curious. I move to follow the fursuit wolf into the house, and as he turns around, I realize, oh, it's one of those furries. I can tell because, well, his fursuit includes assless chaps. And I tried to avert my eyes and made the stupid mistake of stepping over the threshold of the house, and the front door clicked shut behind me. I turned to see a moth-eaten looking bear standing there. And I swear to God, you know that creepy blowjob bear from The Shining? This guy made that character look like Yogi. The way I can describe this fursona was a bear wolf. I just wanted to know what happened to my old couple. So I took the pizzas through the kitchen and put them down on the counter and told old assless chap's wolf in no uncertain terms that I needed payment. And also, I'd really appreciate knowing where Mr. and Mrs. Smith were. The wolf and the bear both mimed laughter, as if this was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Now, I know, please don't scream at me for this next bit. They gestured toward the basement where the techno music was coming from, and against everything I've ever learned from every horror movie and listening to Let's Read, I followed them. And Christ almighty, there was every kind of animal thing you can imagine. An owl dressed in leather bondage, a unicorn showing off almost everything, cartoon cats in diapers, and at the center of everything was a man wearing a bat mask and a cape. And I know that he was a man because that's all he was wearing. and there was my beloved old couple, sitting on a couch, looking absolutely terrified.
Are you guys okay?
I asked them. Mr. Smith looked at me, and Mrs. Smith looked like she was about to burst into tears.
Our grandson came to visit,
she said, gesturing to the assless chap's werewolf.
And he brought some friends,
Mr. Smith said. I had no idea what to do. The furries hadn't done anything directly threatening, but I still felt unsafe and uncomfortable, and clearly so did this older couple. That's when I saw the table set up in the corner with what was very obviously a makeshift meth production lab. And from the looks of it, and the haphazard way these fursuit-wearing freaks were tossing around chemicals, this was unsafe enough to take action. Now I hurried over to the old couple, saying, "Come on, we're leaving," and they both got up. We made it to the basement stairs, then up the hallway. We were nearly home free. And then the bear reared its ugly head, and Mrs. Smith began to cry. Then from downstairs, a low but audible explosion. Suddenly, furries were streaming out of the basement, coughing, screaming, yelling. The naked Batman came barreling past us, swinging free in the open air as he dived out the front door. The grandson, the assless chap's wolf, literally shoved his grandmother out of the way to get to safety. I caught her, dragging both her and Mr. Smith out into the lawn. We took in the fresh air, just in time for another explosion to rock the house. Flames began to spread from the basement into the hallway. Furries were fleeing left and right. Mrs. Smith continued to cry. Mrs. Smith just stood there shaking his head, and the grandson leaped into a car with that bear, and the pair of them took off. Soon, nearly all the furries were gone. The only one who remained was the naked man-bat, and I'm so grateful that he did, because he testified as to exactly what happened, even if it meant outing his double life as a lawyer with a fetish bat persona. Props to him. Not all heroes wear capes, although this one did, and only a cape. I did stop delivering to that old couple, though. Things just felt different after that, and while the story may seem borderline comedic, it was genuinely one of the most terrifying moments of my life, barely making it out in time. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and there are super fun live streams on Sundays and Wednesday nights. If you got a story, be sure to submit them over at my email, letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks for members of the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, always crank that soldier hog. You.